Welcome back to our discussion, The Journey to Delivering the Mission in the Cloud, Part 2, sponsored by Oracle and Intel here on Federal News Network. My guests today are Laura Karup. She's the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Chezian Sivignanam is the Chief Enterprise Architect at the National Science Foundation. Debbie Stevens is Deputy Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And Steve Prescott, Executive Program Director for the Public Sector at Oracle. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And before the break, we were talking about the process of choosing the right applications for the right purpose-built cloud and the data considerations that go along with that. And Chezian, why don't we pick up with you on that same topic?
Sure. At the foundation, our strategy is, moving our data center. I mean, we used to have 2 data centers, and today we have consolidated into 1, and then now we are just moving everything to the cloud and transforming our data center more like a computer facility for managing the building services. That's our strategy.
Not into a gym? You're not going to make it into a cafeteria or a gym?
Yeah, of course,
no.
yeah, exactly. So from that angle, we are taking each of these services that we support, and then we're trying to see what is the best fit going into the cloud. So obviously the marble analogy it works very well for us. We obviously look for a software as a service. That's our first bet. So we want to make sure it's a seamless transition, and also we want really the industry really take it with the innovation, emails like service management, those kind of things, right? And then also, we are also aligned with the President's Management Agenda, which is really moving to shared services. That's really with our mission support services like finance, HR, and administrative services. Because we want to make sure it is going to the place where that is best managed, like Treasury, which probably is going to do wonderful things with finance management, or GSA and OPM, they're championing the HR service. That's our second thing.
So in other words, offload a lot of stuff you might have done in the first place, so you don't even have to worry about where it goes, just you get it from the other agency.
Right, exactly, exactly. And then the next one is really looking at platform services. The platform services, why it is important here is we have a strategy to empower our end users by giving a lot of self-service capabilities. And that's what the platform services brings in. And especially when you're trying to give like a business intelligence service or a collaboration service, these platform services where you have a lot of innovative things going on, and also building the architecture that integrates with other wonderful things happening across the industry. So the platform services really brings that capability. So that's our next layer. And then finally, the third one is really the custom applications. The custom applications, we have huge challenge, right? Because we know the demand on one side is growing all the time because it's a changing world, and the requirements are hitting us so fast, and we have to deliver service in high-speed capacity. On the other side, we have this huge monolithic applications, right? And then we are not able to meet the demand. So the goal here is to break those big monolithic applications into microservices where we can plug in the continuous integration or continuous delivery, bringing the speed and delivering those services, right?
But if those applications were not originally made in that way, if they're legacy code, how do you get to the microservices and container kind of world from the, for lack of a better word, the COBOL era?
Right. So the format that we use is more like the scale agile format, right? So the investments that we have architected are continuous modernization initiatives. So we get like a flat funding on specific initiative. It has a multi-year roadmap, and then the whole investment is tightly integrated with our governance, which brings the customers and the developers very closely with each other, and they meet on a bi-weekly basis. So when the requirements are provided, the thing is we have to make sure these changes happen much faster, and that's where this thing comes in, like how we are enabling the DevSecOps platform and building these microservices and having them delivered in a much faster rate. So, and that's where we look for cloud native applications. So we want to make sure the cloud where we are, the provider where we are going has this best capability of giving these services, and also looking at the market cap, where we can get those skills easily and plug them in. And then also when we are talking about scaled agile, it's bigger teams. We are talking about 500 plus contractors working with many different applications with the customers, right? So we need to make sure this thing is scalable. So those are the three things we mainly focus on as we move to the cloud.
All right. Well, that sounds like it keeps you busy.
Yeah,
frankly.
Very busy.
Three things a
Need
lot.
a lot of help.
Debbie?
Sure. So for the USPTO, I'd certainly echo what Chezin said about the monolith and tightly coupled applications, custom applications that we have that are probably the most difficult to navigate to the cloud for us. Certainly for us, we are a highly productive, performance-based organization, both on patents and the trademark side. So it's very important, and picking up on our last segment about the data and image availability to our end users. So performance and the data and the availability of data and image to our end users is really important. So when we think about we'll say the migration from the monolith applications, not only in terms of what Chezin said about the microservice aspect, we also have to think about the performance. We have.
And when you say images, you mean pictures, artwork for patent
absolutely.
examiners.
So for
Okay.
patent examiners, they come in forms of design, mechanical, chemical drawings.
Right.
So those are, we refer to those as image flip rates in the trademark examining attorney world. They are pictures of your trademarks that you know and experience every day. So those are images, and those need to be cycled through and examined at a very high rate for the examiners to maintain their productivity. So I would say that in the USPTO, the key for our cloud strategy is certainly wrapped around, as I said before, about the business, the data, the image, and the performance of that. That's very key for us, as well as you can imagine, my colleagues as well, the security aspect for us. So whether or not we will choose to put certain data at a certain time in the life cycle of either a patent or trademark prosecution will be telling. So when my colleagues here mentioned about maybe different cloud providers, number one, and different, maybe having the application on a cloud, the database on a cloud, and maybe the data itself in another cloud, perhaps that might be a good strategy for us.
Yeah, so Steve, how do agencies, what's the best strategy for that? Because they do have the availability of shared services, they do have the monolithic, and I think the bonded applications where the database and the application were kind of developed as a whole, those are hard to kind of pry out and get the flexibility of cloud.
Yeah, I think as an industry, we've all been looking at which architectures are optimal in the cloud. And early on, one of the things that we always said is that you would not want to separate components to different clouds because, for performance reasons, for a variety of reasons. In reality, actually what we found is if you architect it properly, it can actually work fine. There is some responsibility you have to look at what are your performance requirements, what bandwidth exists from one cloud to another, but it is doable. So I guess my point there is that that's not an option that you should take off the table. You should at least consider that as one option. More broadly, your initial question here was selection of workloads. How do agencies decide where to focus their attention? And one of the really important prerequisites that we've seen federal agencies do is rationalizing their portfolio. Rationalizing essentially meaning reducing. And three areas I wanted to focus on there that I would encourage any federal agency to look at: rationalizing applications, rationalizing technology, and actually rationalizing your vendor community. And I'll talk briefly about what I mean by each of them. As far as applications are concerned, part of my role is working with federal agencies on baselining their portfolio of assets today before moving to the cloud. And in the area of applications, one of the things that we frequently see is a lot of replication. We might, one agency might have 3 different customer relationship management systems and 2 different call center systems and 5 different budgeting systems, because traditionally those grew up independently of each other. And you could move all that to the cloud, but you don't have to. And so one of the things that a lot of federal agencies are doing is seeing the move to the cloud as an opportunity to step back and say, what do we want to carry forward into the cloud? A similar thing exists in the area of the underlying technology. And so I'll mention, data management, since that's an area that we focus on a lot. There's a lot of variety of data these days. There's relational data, there's non-relational data, there's structured information, unstructured information, batch data, streaming data, and there's been some focus on saying that you should have a different technology solution for each one of those different types of data. But there is an alternative solution, which is to have a converged data platform that through one tool is able to handle all of those use cases through different kind of subcomponents. And so that's another type of rationalization of your data tier, is get rid of duplicative technologies. And then the last one I'll mention is at more of a meta level, the actual vendors that you're working with itself. Is that most federal agencies are working with many different vendors because of the underlying technology and the applications. But some vendors have suites of technology, suites of applications, suites of underlying technology. And if those technologies and if those applications meet your requirements, going to a smaller number of vendors that include suites just simplifies your interaction with the vendor community.
All right, and which brings up the question of what you do with remaining data centers if you have them still in your agency. I think Chezian's, you're turning yours into a place to operate the building from, so that there will be no data center for the National Science Foundation. But Debbie, what about the USPTO? You still have data centers. How do you make them,
so,
in a sense, you would make them match the cloud rather than the other way around?
Yeah, I think for us, it will clearly be a hybrid data center with hopefully many of our applications taking advantage of the cloud and the capabilities there. We certainly feel that as a result of this journey, it will reduce our data center footprint. And I think Chezian was going to, or someone said maybe make a gym out of theirs.
That was my idea, not his.
Okay. We actually have some future thoughts about that. We are embarking on a IT transformation that is truly, as Chezian mentioned, using SAFe, or the Scaled Agile framework approach. But we are currently engaging agile pilot teams co-location, so we could certainly use some of that data center space that has been recouped or will be recouped in that type of agile experience for our teams, to get our teams co-located, because we feel that will drive the value not only for IT and the technology going forward, but also the business capability.
So some development might actually move into that physical space.
Absolutely. We're thinking there's certainly not lost on us in the Alexandria corridor that real estate is an essential
Precious
commodity, yes, and we would definitely want to take advantage of that.
Sure. And Laura, you're going to still operate data centers also.
Certainly.
So what do they look like?
As part of our IT transformation, also looking at a hybrid environment for some time. And for us, it really comes out of thinking about the long-term strategy. So there are applications where we may be continuing to develop them and enhance them. In the long run, we want to get them in the cloud environment, but because of data or other requirements, in the short run, it's not the right fit. So we're looking at where we can use containerization, other technologies to make that portability easier in the future, where that's cost effective for us.
Okay, but you will still have data centers as you go forward.
Yes.
All right, and the idea of rationalizing applications, I think, as Steve mentioned, can be a tough thing for agencies. How do you convince people, yeah, you really don't need this anymore, because this is an age-old problem. You turn off something and see who screams. And very often it's one or small group, and you can serve them in some other way.
It is difficult, and I would say it's difficult emotionally and politically, it's not difficult technically, right? So the emotional part of it is that, in most federal agencies, there's a set of bureaus or kind of sub-agencies that operate somewhat independently, somewhat autonomously. And in some cases, historically, they've been allowed to make their own decisions. And when you rationalize, it becomes a discussion around kind of power and authority. Like, are you taking away the power from that bureau to make its own decisions going forward? The other element of that is customizations. So when in the on-premise world, agencies deployed traditional licensed software, they would often hire contractors to make a lot of customizations to make it meet the unique requirements of that bureau or that department. And when you move to software as a service, where it's a multi-tenant solution, you have to think hard about which customizations are requirements versus which ones are you willing to walk away from in order to gain the benefits of a shared solution.
All right, on that note, we're going to take our second break, and we'll be right back after this one. This discussion is The Journey to Delivering the Mission in the Cloud, Part 2, sponsored by Oracle and Intel here on Federal News Network.